What's up, party people? It's your old pal F here for another edition of F Bombs. In case you're new to this, I guess you would call it show. This is sort of my little corner of the interwebs where I very, very casually talk about my experiences in the animation industry, as well as my opinions about, animation and media in general. I also sometimes talk about what's going on at Fountain's Pen Cartoons. And by the way, if you're watching this, that means you have a really easy method to click through and hit subscribe to Fountain's Pen Cartoons. But again, this is kind of my little fireside chat with anyone who's interested in hearing about this stuff. You're going to notice right away that I put absolutely no production values into this. I have a professional grade microphone. I don't use it because it required all kinds of scary looking software for me to download. And in case you haven't noticed, I'm an older guy. I'm going to be 55 in August, and a lot of this stuff is just alien to me, so I don't bother with it. My whole point is this is a casual affair. So I would apologize for the fact that there's no production values to this, except, what can I tell you? This is how I set out to do it. But yeah, this is where I come out and I talk about, some of my experiences, where I think the industry is going, what I think it's doing wrong, what I think it's doing right, stuff that I like, stuff that I don't like. So if you're interested in this, you should definitely click through and look at some of the other editions of F-Bombs that I've done. But also, you should watch our cartoons. The whole reason this channel exists is so that I can showcase the cartoons that I'm producing through Fountain's Pen Productions, which is a mentorship program that I run, where I take a whole bunch of really super talented animators and young people who have wanted to be a part of this whole nutty collaborative effort known as animation, and we make cartoons and we put them up here for free. And so in lieu of that, we would really, really appreciate it if you would watch them and then hit like, share, subscribe, tell the world, tell your friends, spread the word, because as of now, we're not doing anything to raise money and we don't have any way of monetizing. So we are doing it strictly for the love of you, the viewers. So please, please, please do your part. Like, share, and subscribe. We've finished what we're calling season 1 of our cartoons, and season 2 is going to be absolutely astounding as well. I put some sneak peeks to it on, so you should have a look at those. And like I said, I try to semi-frequently do these F-bombs, and if you've missed any of those, I've done one where I've talked about my experience working on South Park. I've talked about my experiences on Invader Zim. And today I'm going to talk to you about my experiences on Fairly Oddparents, but we'll get to that in a second. I've had episodes where I talk about AI generated art and what that's doing to the industry. I've talked about the industry in general. So if you're interested in any of these topics, please give those a look. And like I say, once you're done watching those, watch our cartoons. I would love to hear your thoughts on the stuff that I talk about in this, because I know some of it is, I don't ever go out of my way to be controversial. But, I do try and bring up talking points that I think are worthy of discussion. So please leave your comments below. I have no feelings to hurt. So if you watch this video and you hate it, do not be afraid to tell me. And as I said, I do these very, very much on the fly. I put, there's no script. I really... I planned this out like not at all, but as it just so happens, miracle of miracles, I've got the house to myself today. It's summertime, my kid's in summer camp, so I've got the house to myself, and so it occurred to me, oh gosh, I should really make a video, and I should really cover a topic that is, substantial and takes up some time, which is why I'm going to talk about the Fairly Oddparents, because the Fairly Oddparents was undeniably the most popular show I ever worked on, followed possibly closely by Invader Zim, and that's a whole different kind of popularity. And like I said, I did a video on Invader Zim, so if you're interested in that, please give that a watch. But the Fairly Odd Parents for a very long time was the number two kids cartoon in the world. Like it was huge, and it was a certainly a pivotal point in my animation career. So it stands to reason that I would revisit this, and it's why this video is probably going to be one of the longer ones. So I hope you're interested. That being said, I'm going to try and really make it worth your while, even though I don't have fancy graphics that I'm going to put up or anything like that. I am going to show you some of my collectibles and stuff that I've acquired, or rather that I kept over the years from my time on the show. So you're going to see stuff that you can't really see anywhere else. So yeah, the Fairly Odd Parents. Well, first of all, I should get right to and make something abundantly clear. When I tell these stories, I am telling them as I remember them, which is not entirely accurate. So on the one hand, this is me telling you how I remember them. On the other, if you watch this and this somehow doesn't align up with whatever timeline you dig up off the interwebs or whatever, or if I get dates wrong, or if I get names wrong, which is something I do a lot of, don't be surprised, don't be offended, don't be just don't be surprised by it at all, because this is all just, like I said, there's no script. This is off the top of my head, just me and you having to talk about my time on a show. So you should take everything I say with a grain of salt. You should understand that this is all the opinions expressed are the opinions that I have at this moment in time. So, none of it should be treated as gospel. And as a general rule, kids, probably don't treat anything on the internet as gospel, especially this. So, anyway, to tell the story of Fairly Odd Parents, I should backtrack a little bit, but I'm not going to backtrack too far, because I do have an entire video dedicated to my whole animation career journey. So if you're at all interested in that, please watch that video. I think it's pretty entertaining and it's very educational. If you're looking to make a huge life change or career change, it's a good video to watch. So I got to backtrack a little, but I'm not going to backtrack too far. Just to breeze over some of the basics of how it all started, was my animation career really began working for Clasky Chupo on the Wild Thornberrys when it was brand new. That's where I got my storyboarding start. I had never storyboarded before, but I had to learn very quickly. And boy, storyboarding for the Wild Thornberrys, that was like animation boot camp, because I was surrounded by super talented people. And I got the job basically by lying and saying, oh yeah, sure, I know how to storyboard, when I'd never storyboarded before in my life. So when I started on the show, I had to learn really fast. And so I just observed everyone around me, and I learned really, really fast. But it wasn't the type of show that I wanted to work on. I wanted to work on cartoony cartoons. I desperately wanted to work at either Cartoon Network or Nickelodeon. Those are where I had my eyes like absolutely set. I'd done a storyboard test for Angry Beavers that I was really hoping to get on and didn't, because I had no experience. And in addition to that, Clasky Chupo, because they made shows like The Wild Thornberrys and Rugrats, Santa Bagito, Our Real Monsters, all that stuff, they had sort of a gentleman's agreement with Nickelodeon that Nickelodeon wouldn't poach any of their talent, as we were called. Meaning they wouldn't take any of their crews because they supplied shows for the network, which, makes sense. I have no grudges about any of that. I understand it. However, it made it very difficult for someone like me who wanted to work at Nickelodeon to approach them and say, "Hey, I wanna work for you guys," and they go, "Oh, you work at Clasky Chupo? No, we can't have anything to do with you." So, so after a whole lot of back and forth that way, and just really finding the Wild Thornberrys which I'll do a whole video on that another time. Wild Thornberrys was full of challenges that had nothing to do with storyboarding. I actually loved storyboarding for the show. I thought it was a really, really good show. Very well done. I count myself as grateful for never having had to work on Rugrats at any point. Um, but nothing against the Rugrats, but boy, the poor people who put their blood, sweat, and tears into that show, man. Anyway, but I wanted to work on cartoony shows, and so an opportunity came along for me to do animation for the upcoming South Park movie. So as a way to get the Clasky Chupo stink off of me, I went to go work on the South Park movie, and I have a whole video on that as well, which you should watch. And it worked up to a point, but while I was on South Park, I would go to Nickelodeon and show them my stuff, and they're like, well, these are fine storyboards, but they're all done in the Clasky Chupo style. And we don't have anything in that style. We, at the time, they were doing stuff like Angry Beavers and Cat Dog and Rocko's Modern Life, and oh, would I have loved to work on Rocko's Modern Life. They did shows like that, and I didn't have any samples of anything like that, even though my portfolio was jam-packed with very cartoony drawings, stuff that absolutely would have fit into their style. It's just one of those boxes that they check, that if you don't do that style, if you haven't worked in that style before, there's always going to be 20 people vying for the job ahead of you who have worked in that style, and they're always going to get the job ahead of you. So I just found myself stuck. So, one of the reasons I moved to Los Angeles in the first place was because I wanted to pitch my own cartoons as well as, work in animation in general. And at that time, there was a little thing going on called Oh Yeah, Cartoons, which of course was headed by the great Fred Seibert. And they were taking pitches, and I was like, ooh, okay, this gives me an excuse to do a storyboard in a cartoony style, and while doing that, simultaneously pitch a short idea for Oh Yeah Cartoons. So I came up with a cartoon. It was called Hyper Hair. I'll do a show on that another time. But anyway, I took it to Fred Seibert, got a meeting with Fred Seibert miraculously, even though I didn't know anybody. I got really good at cold calling. I would just cold call, and because I have this sort of latent power of being charming over the phone, I managed to get a meeting with him, managed to pitch him my cartoon, and he basically said to me, well, I don't like your cartoon idea, but I like how you draw quite a bit. So, and you're a funny guy, and I like your style. And by the way, my friend Larry Huber has a show called Chalk Zone. He needs some storyboards done. Do you want a freelance storyboard for him? So that got my foot in the door, and I started storyboarding freelance for Chalk Zone. Chalk Zone was on the verge of its big series pickup, and so I was delighted. Now, while I was doing storyboards for Chalk Zone, I would go in and I would always make a point of sort of walking around, saying hi to people, meeting people, and Larry Huber, bless his heart, was kind enough to introduce me to all the various people, because he was a producer on Oh Yeah Cartoons as well. So he would introduce me to the other people. Pretty soon, my Chalk Zone storyboards, which were considered a hit, and I was Larry found me easy to work with, and blah blah blah. So that started spreading around. Hey, there's a new board artist in town, and he's available. And basically, at that point, if anyone at Nickelodeon asked me to just do a storyboard, I said yes. So if you go back and watch some of those Oh Yeah cartoons, you will see my name at the back end of a lot of those, because I found out that there's just always a need for good storyboard artists in the animation industry. So anyway. So while I was doing that, he was introducing me to the other creators, and that's where I met people like Rob Renzetti and Dave Wasson, and Seth MacFarlane was actually there at the time too, but I never met him in that context. I met him years later, but that's another story. But I also met a fella named Butch Hartman. And Butch had like 3 shows in development at Nickelodeon at the time. He was doing his shorts for Oh Yeah Cartoons called The Fairly Odd Parents. He also had another one co-created by Steve Marmel, who would go on to co-produce and write for be the head writer for The Fairly Odd Parents. And then he had another show. I forget what the name of it was, but anyway, he had like 3 shows in development, and I'm like, that's what I want to be doing. Is I want to have 3 shows in development at Nickelodeon. And so, in addition to the fact that I met Butch, and I was like, wow, this guy's got energy and drive and moxie, and kind of ambition that I could relate to. So I was like, I am going to get to know this guy. And as I chatted with him a little bit here and there, found out we're both from Michigan. We have similar backgrounds and that sort of thing. So there was a lot to chit chat over. And eventually, he was like, hey, do you want to do a Dan Danger storyboard? So I did a Dan Danger storyboard. He was very happy with it. Whenever I met with him and showed him my boards and stuff like that, our senses of humor seemed to gel really easily. I got his jokes, he got mine. At that time, I was not that brave about adding in gags and stuff, but I would add in little details that would make him laugh. And when that happened, that's always a good way to get your storyboard, pushed through to approval. So, and I'll be honest, when I started doing freelancing for Nickelodeon, and I was doing it for Chalk Zone, Oh Yeah Cartoons, just a lot of the different Oh Yeah Cartoon shorts were having me do storyboards and stuff, and I was meeting people, but they were all kind of straight from the What a Cartoon Show crowd. They had all done Two Stupid Dogs, Johnny Bravo, Powerpuff Girls. They had all worked on all of those shows, and so they all knew each other. In addition to that, a lot of them had all gone to Cal Arts. So they had all known each other for a really long time, and they weren't all that, responsive or receptive to, me at the time, this corn shucking nobody from Kalamazoo. And yes, that's really where I'm from. So the fact that Butch would talk to me and would chit chat with me and would get to know me and was enthusiastic about me, that was very encouraging, because while everyone there was more or less nice to me, with 1 or 2 exceptions that I'll name another time, Butch was enthusiastic about me, and I think he sensed that I had ambition and that I had drive and that I was really ready to just do whatever it took to turn in a perfect storyboard and yada yada. And so, point is, he responded to me and I responded to him. We got along, and he liked my boards. And so, while I was doing that, I was also pitching my own. As I said, my first pitch to Fred for the Oh Yeah Cartoons show had not been received. But the whole time I'm doing storyboards for everybody, I'm also having conversations with Larry Huber and some of the other creators and sort of getting a feel for what it is they were looking for. And as I continued to do that, I came up with my own idea. And again, bless their hearts, they all just sort of helped school me. And here's how you put together a pitch. Here's how you, present it to Fred, blah, blah, blah. And so, on the advice of one of the other producers of Oh Yeah Cartoons, I came up with an idea called the Tantrum. And this one wound up being something that Fred did respond to, did like a lot, saw franchise potential in it, and this is another video for another time. Fred got behind it in a big, big way. Like, he pushed for it to become a regular series, and obviously that never happened. But I got the last slot in the Oh Yeah Cartoons for that season, so I was really excited about that. This happened simultaneously with getting hired on full-time to do boards for Chalk Zone, the series. Now, in addition to that, for doing boards for Chalk Zone, the series, I'd also been doing more Oh Yeah Cartoons boards. And in addition to that, Invader Zim was looking for a character designer, which I, as I went into in detail in the other video, I applied for and did a test for and won. And that wound up being a really great experience too. So, on the one hand, I'd become very chummy with Butch. He really liked my boards. I'd done some more freelance stuff for him, um, and um, and so I had my hand in a lot of pots at Nickelodeon. I was doing my full time job at first was for Chalk Zone. Then I was still doing freelance boards for all the other OYA creators, and then in addition to that, I was working on my own short for OYA cartoons. So it was a lot going on. And then when Chalk Zone ended, I got hired on Invader Zim full time. So I was there full time juggling 5 different things. Okay. And in the meantime, still, sort of helping Butch, do stuff and do storyboards for him and what have you. And Butch, and this is why I will always, sort of say that he was a mentor to me, and I will always be grateful to him. When it came time for me to do my OYA cartoon short, I asked Butch to direct it because I didn't know about directing cartoons. I didn't know how to do it. And I took it to Butch, and I'm like, Butch, will you direct, my cartoon? And he's like, no. I was like, please, please, please direct my cartoon. He's like, no, I'm not going to direct it. You're going to direct it. And I'm like, I don't know how to direct cartoons. It looks way too hard. I don't want to do it. He's like, if you don't do it, you're going to regret it. Sit down. I'm going to teach you how to direct. And doggone it, he taught me how to direct. He taught me what sheet timing was. He taught me what slugging a storyboard was. He taught me about timing. He taught me what it meant when something was on 2s or on 1s or on 4s or 8s or whatever. He taught me how to direct a cartoon. He also taught me how to economize my story because the script that I had written was twice as long as it needed to be. So he taught me how to direct, and it's not like he got anything out of it. I was done storyboarding for him at the time, and I was, he didn't really have any reason to do it. I wasn't working for him. I wasn't going to be working for him. Like I said, I was going on to Invader Zim and doing my own show. So he just, of his own free will, taught me how to direct. And I'm always going to be grateful to him for that because nobody else was lining up at the time to show me, oh, here's how you get better. And here's how you do better. And here's how you get better results. He was one of the first people who, drilled it into me right out of the get-go. When I started doing storyboards for him, he would always be like, yeah, we send these off to Korea, and a lot of times they come back off model, or they come back wrong, and a lazy board artist will go, oh well, the Koreans messed it up. He's like, no, that is your responsibility to get it right. You're the director, you're the storyboard artist. It is up to you. So if it comes back wrong, whose fault is it, Fountain? And I'd be like, it's my fault. So that right out of the gate put me in a mindset of, do everything but in-betweens, and sometimes even do in-betweens. You make sure every I is dotted. You make sure every T is crossed. And it just it set me on a path to how I would wind up directing cartoons. That is to say, directing by making sure every base is covered. So anyway, he taught me how to direct. I wound up co-directing it because Larry Huber said to me, well, you're going to have someone to do your sheet timing. That's where I drew the line. I don't know if you guys have ever seen timing sheets. I've got some somewhere, but I'm not going to go dig them up. They're really hard. They're really hard, and they make no sense to me. I don't know what is up with me neurologically, but if you put a chart in front of me, I don't care what kind of chart it is, it makes no sense to me. I can't read them. I've read the Silmarillion 5 times. I've understood it 2 of those times. I've read the Silmarillion. I've read Shakespeare. I've read Moliere. I've read, I'm not a dumb person, I guess is my point. But when it comes to charts and things like timing sheets, they might as well be written in ancient Egyptian. I just don't get it. So I brought in someone else to help me direct it. He basically did my timing sheets, but I did everything else. So the Tantrum turned out really good, especially when you consider that it was really kind of my student film. It was my first time really directing anything. And one of the people who was most impressed by it was Butch. Um, Again, especially since, uh, you know, he had seen me take on a lot of his, directorial proclivities. Like he saw me put to use the things that he had taught me, so he was very impressed by it. He liked it a lot. So while I'm working on Invader Zim, so not only did the Tantrum go over really well, but Fred Seibert and the folks at Nickelodeon, many of the people there were very hyped on getting the Tantrum picked up as a series. Um, and so they bought it from me, lock, stock, and barrel. I wish I could show it to you, but I don't have the rights. Nickelodeon gave me a nice big fat paycheck, which they don't do anymore. So just don't ask. And they bought the Tantrum lock, stock, and barrel, and so I can never do anything with it. But they had purchased it with the full intention of, we are going to make this a series. And so for another year, the Tantrum as a property was in development. One of the reasons I still have this was because they asked me to write the Tantrum feature film, because I not only had to come up with synopses for a 24 episode series run. They wanted to know what we would do if it became a movie. They wanted to know, all the story arcs and all that stuff. So that was a huge lesson in world building and in pitching. And I got to know development executives, and everyone was going around saying, this kid, this Fountain dude, this is the next Butch Hartman, because Butch Hartman at the time had gotten his big pickup for the Fairly Odd Parents. Now, as I said, I was working on Invader Zim at the time, and if you watch the Zim video, you'll hear about the details of this. But things were kind of going south on Zim. I enjoyed working on the show. I enjoyed most of the people on it. Jonan was always a gentleman to me. He was always really nice. So no beefs there. But it was, one of the things, and I have no problem saying this, one of the things that was coming out of Invader Zim was that the guy who was my assistant character designer, Aaron Alexovich, was just simply way better at it than I was. He got the style better. He was more trained as a character designer. Invader Zim was my first full-time character design job. And I'm proud of the work I did on it. I did some of the best stuff I've ever done in my career on that show. But Aaron was better. And it was becoming very clear that he was kind of the guy for that job. And so what to do with me? Well, at that same time, The Fairly Odd Parents as a series was getting its pickup. And Butch said to me, hey, do you want to come work on The Fairly Odd Parents full time? And so that worked out nicely. I was like, oh, well, you know what? Things aren't going so well on Zim. So yes, I will leave Zim and go work for you on The Fairly Odd Parents. So now I'm poised to work on at the time, Invader Zim was all the rage, and Fairly Odd Parents had a huge amount of buzz behind it too. So I was set to be working on two of the most popular shows the network will ever see. So I go over and I start doing storyboards for The Fairly Odd Parents. It was literally physically in the building on the other side of the building. And obviously, the two shows could not be any more different. But I went over, and at first, Butch didn't have a storyboard position, but he wasn't very happy. He didn't know if he was going to be able to get me. But he asked me to come over as a storyboard revisionist, with the intention of making me a full-time board artist. So at first I went over and I was just doing revisions, and that literally, I feel like, lasted a couple of weeks at the most. And then almost immediately thereafter made me a full-time board artist. And one of the first boards that possibly the first storyboard that I remember doing was Dream Goat. So I did Dream Goat, and it was funny because Dream Goat was one of those episodes that just it was wide open for visual humor. And at this point in my career, I was feeling pretty good about things, and in addition to the fact that Butch had kind of taken me under his wing, and he and I were friendly at the time, and so I felt a little daring with Dream Goat. Um, so wait, am I mixing stuff up? I think I am. Anyway, I did Dream Goat, and I'll be perfectly honest, it was not one of my favorite episodes. Now, by the way, it's a perfectly fine episode. So if you liked Dream Goat, then no harm, no foul. It was just, I don't know. It was one of those ones where it felt very Simpsonsy to me. And again, I didn't love it a whole lot, but it was on Dream Goat that I learned what one of my sort of skills are. One of my skills is that when I'm given an assignment, I find a way to enjoy it regardless of what it is. So I was not enthusiastic about Dream Goat, but I found a way to enjoy it. And so I started peppering it with little visual gags and just little bits of acting here and there. And Butch responded to it really well and liked it a lot. And so after Dream Goat, the next script that I got was a little one that still stands out as one of my absolute favorites called Father Time. That that one is where I really cut loose, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna run with it. That one was very, very wide open for visual gags. I came up with the fact that when the scooter goes back in time, it goes backwards. When it goes front in time, it goes forwards. Um, I really cut loose on all the acting, and yes, it is my scene when the dad says, "And this is where I'd put my trophy if I had one." Those are my drawings. It's so funny to me that that wound up being this, you know, internet meme sensation because I remember thinking at the time, wow, I'm really pushing dad's poses here. These are very undad like. But because it was this alternate reality, dad, I felt free to sort of push his poses and really, really exaggerate his features. And much to my surprise, Butch loved it. So those are all my original drawings for that particular scene. And again, just all the '80s jokes, all that stuff. It just gave me a lot to play around with, and that was where Butch first sort of saw, oh, okay, John can take a script and he can play with it. And so it was really after that script that I became known as a guy who could punch it up. And in the storyboarding community, it's expected of you. Like, you're given a script, but or at least back then, you were expected to punch it up and to add to it, to jazz it up. So that was kind of the first one where I really sort of established myself as a gag guy, a guy who could come up with gags. And I also changed little parts of the script as well. And so the fact that both Butch and Steve liked that sort of gave me the taste of blood in the water. And so I was really ready to do it. So then the next script to come along was one that was apparently in terrible, terrible shape. And Butch basically took it to me, and I guess both he and Steve, I feel like they were both working on the Christmas special at the time, so they were stretched really thin. So Butch brought me the script for Action Packed and said, this script is in trouble. It's not very good. It needs help. Take this script and you can do whatever you want with it. Just please make it good. He's like, because this is a big wish. This is a wish I've had in mind from the very beginning. This is one that I think has the potential to be really funny, but the script as it is just not funny. So please take this, do whatever you want with it. You can break the style of the show. You can go into, you can make it an alternate reality. Just whatever you want to do, just take it and run with it, but please make it good. And so I took that to heart, and I read the script, and oh boy, yeah, it was not good. There are versions of the script floating around that have been retrofitted to fit what I did to it. In a better world, I would have gotten co-writing credit on it, but it just wasn't done back then. So it would have caused apparently would have caused all kinds of union problems and that sort of thing. So, but I rewrote a lot of the dialogue. I rewrote practically all of the action, and I did exactly what he gave me carte blanche to do. I took it, I ran with it, I replotted the whole thing, and I changed the art direction. And I didn't change the art direction so drastically that you couldn't tell it was Timmy anymore. But I changed it in that I put him in poses, in action poses, and had him do action things that his overall makeup, just the way his design is structured, you wouldn't have thought he was capable of doing. So I really, really pushed the limits of, what Timmy and crew looked like. And I added, shadows and big effects and all sorts of stuff. So, so I did it, and I really went to town on it. And it was on this episode that he was like, "Guess what? One of our directors is leaving, so you're going to direct this one." And I said to him, "I don't want to direct this one. This is going to be super hard." And he was like, "That's why you're going to do it." And again, I owe him for that. He pushed me when I didn't even want to be pushed. And he let me take this great big episode and run with it, and it wound up being the second cartoon I had ever directed. And it still winds up being something that, so many things that I look back on that I've done in the past, I look back on and I kind of cringe, and I'm like, oh yeah, that was me learning. And look, I can find flaws in Action Packed, to be sure, but I'm still very proud of everything I did on it. It's one of my favorite episodes. So I really went to town on it, and boy, every pose you see in that is me just bleeding onto my storyboard panels. Like I boarded it, I directed it, I replotted it. That is about as me of an episode of Fairly Odd Parents as you're ever gonna get. So I did that one, and Butch automatically loved it, automatically flipped over it, was really, really happy. And it was on that episode that he started having me come to the voice records. I'm pretty sure he had me come to the voice records for that because he wanted me to help get the reads that were really going to go with what I had boarded. And then he also he brought me in on the editing process. And once again, this second thing that I had ever directed, it wasn't twice as long as it should have been, but it was about a third longer than it needed to be. And cutting a third of a cartoon, that is a lot. And it was one of those situations where I was like, I don't even know how we're going to do it. Can we call the network and ask for more time? No, we're not going to call the network and ask for more time. They're not going to do that. We have to cut it. And it gave me my first taste of when you're editing something and you feel like, oh my gosh, I can't possibly cut that scene because it's just so wonderful and just so perfect. And then you cut it and you go back and you go, wow, I don't miss that at all. It's better off without it. So it was on that episode that he really sort of gave me my first taste of the entire pipeline process. I had started becoming chummier with Steve Marmel, the head writer of the show, and Bob Boyle, the art director of the show. He was really excited about this episode too. He and I had a lot of fun with the fact that the art direction changes when Timmy makes his wish. So it was a lot of fun for everybody. And what wound up happening, if you watch every episode of Fairly Odd Parents after that, every episode before Action Packed was um, a lot talkier and a lot more sort of jokey. Um, and especially the whole season after Action Packed, it seems like every episode had an action sequence after that, because I had, and yes, I'm going to take this win. I had established that Timmy can move in action poses and he can do action things, and I showed everybody this is how you can do it. So, so I do that episode, and I came to find out later that it was on the strength of that episode that I think it was the president of Nickelodeon, um, went to Butch and said, "Wow, that episode, action packed, that looks really good." And Butch wound up saying to him, "Well, if I can do that with an episode of the show, imagine what I could do with the movie." So it was on the strength of that episode that we got to do Abracatastrophe, which a lot of people are kind of so-so on in terms of whether or not it's a good Fairly Odd Parents movie, which I understand. But what it was the first Fairly Odd Parents movie. And I was listed as a sequence director on that. I was also it was my first time as storyboard supervisor on that, but that was another Fairly Odd Parents episode, undertaking, whatever you want to call it, movie, where it was me at the driver's seat of a lot of that. And for all of the people who hated the monkey stuff, I hated it too. And I fought like the Dickens to have it taken out entirely and go in a different direction. Butch wasn't having it. So there you go. Now, in addition to that, the monkey sequences were actually much longer, and there was another big sequence that was added into it that I just knew logistically we were never going to have time to do, and I talked Butch out of taking them out. So, but I'm getting ahead of myself, because that, like I said, Abracatastrophe, by the time I got handed Abracatastrophe, Butch had pretty well established me as his right-hand guy when it came to storyboards and directing, because following Father Time, which was a big hit, and following Action Packed, which was a big hit, it just became apparent that I had a very similar sensibility, not just as a humorist, but as a director, to Butch. Like, he and I would have similar ideas, and he and I would come, and by the way, this is back when, I was really getting my feet wet as a director, and I was really having a good time. And my sessions with Butch, where I would take in my storyboards or I would take in my thumbnails, and I would sit with him for an hour or two and just go over stuff, and he and I would crack each other up. We were friendly. And dare I say, we were very friendly. We would talk about other stuff, and we would chit-chat about this, that, and the other. And I gotta say, the Butch that I knew then was a very different Butch from the Butch that I knew, or that I saw the last time I saw him. And even a very different Butch than he was, towards the end of my time on the Fairly Odd Parents. Point being, he and I would have a blast together. We like I said, we would sit there, we would go over gags, we would crack each other up, and that was always, for me, that was always a key to getting my storyboard pass through, was if I made Butch laugh in my pitch to him, then I had a much better chance of him not giving me changes to make, which is something Butch loved to do. So I had a built-in sort of reward system for, if I make Butch laugh, if I put in lots of gags that really make him laugh, then that's less work for me. And then when I pitched it to the crew and the network and all that stuff, if I got laughs there, that was even less work for me. So what wound up happening is, the way we used to do it in the olden days, when storyboards were done on paper, is we would pin all the storyboard pages up in Nickelodeon's big conference room. And what was funny is my boards would sometimes, and the conference room is huge. It was like one of those big boardrooms you see in movies. most people's storyboards would take up about half the room. Mine would circle the room, and sometimes they'd have to be taking them down as I was pitching them so that they could put up the continuation on it. Point being, my storyboards started getting a reputation for being super detailed. That is to say, I would pose them out like crazy to the point where they were practically animated. Um, and but consequently, what I also learned was that when you're, most of the other board artists hated pitching their own material, whereas I really loved it. I loved the showmanship of it. I loved being a big ham, and I loved doing all the voices and stuff like that when I would get up there and emote for the characters. And what I also discovered is, again, when you sell the storyboard using your own acting, using your own sort of vaudevillian abilities, the more laughs you get in that boardroom, the fewer revisions you get when you walk out of the room. And that was always the number one goal, was avoid getting revisions, because you generally only had a week or less to do them, and that's a week that you could be spending recuperating from the 3 weeks that you had to do the board in the first place. So I would put my everything into those show pitches, because the bigger the laughs you got, the fewer revisions there were. And I famously got to a point where I think there was exactly one storyboard that was up there, and that had absolutely one Fairly Oddparents storyboard that had absolutely no revisions to it. So anyway, the show that followed that was Smarty Pants, which was another episode that Butch was like, whatever you did to Action Packed, do with Smarty Pants. So I did that with Smarty Pants. And by the way, Smarty Pants is one of those episodes, practically all of the dialogue was rewritten by me, especially all of the Smart Kid stuff. The Smart Kid stuff that was in the original script was not that smart. I had to smart it up. And I didn't, not by doing research, just by virtue of the fact that I am a nerd. Like I consider myself sort of a student of the world, and so I read about a lot of different things, and so I felt very strongly that I hate it. I hate it in shows when they're like, oh, the character is super smart now, and then they say stuff that's just really basic. So I went out of my way to really smarten up that script. And again, also pulled a lot of my visuals and did a lot of gags that that people don't expect. And one of the things that came out in that episode was that Butch pointed out to me was my acting. Not me personally, but like the characters, the way they're posed and the way they interact. One of my favorite moments in that episode is when Timmy and Chester are making up after, being at odds with each other for a good long while. And they're backstage at the Smartathon or whatever it was. And they're just kind of talking back and forth. And it's, a lot of board artists will take moments like that, and they'll just have the characters standing there and talking like this. And occasionally they'll gesture like that. And that's so boring. I have them exchange a couple of bottles of water, and that's sort of symbolic of them making up and sharing and blah, blah, blah. So giving characters little bits of stuff to do, really nailing the subtleties of their facial expressions and stuff. So that's what really came out of that episode. And then after that was a partnership. And a partnership was one of those ones where I was really, really determined to try and bring some heart into the show, because the show had a reputation already of being very jokey. And the whole idea of Cosmo and Wanda splitting up and all that stuff, I really, by this time I'd grown very, very fond of the characters and the idea of them splitting up, because the Cosmo and Wanda that I had come to know were madly in love, like just stupidly in love with each other. And so the idea of them breaking up was really, really powerful. And so I wanted to make it, I wanted that episode to have tons and tons of heart. And, I did the best I could. It still wound up being very jokey. And a lot of the areas in that episode that I was hoping would sort of be a little more touching still came off as jokey, but that was my attempt. But that stands out as another episode that a lot of people like. So, uh, point being, I was really off to the races on this show, and by the time I had finished with a partnership, it had become clear, I think, to Butch and to even the executives at Nickelodeon, to Steve Marmel and to Bob Boyle, that I'd really established myself as someone who gets the voice of the show, and it had gotten to the point where on shows I was directing, if Butch couldn't be in the editing bay or if Butch couldn't be at the voice record, he would send me instead, and so I became sort of the mini Butch. And so when it came time to do Abracatastrophe, Butch was like, "Okay, you got to buckle in on this because you're not only going to be doing this, but we're going to make you storyboard supervisor." And that was an idea that I had had because Butch was very frustrated because finding people who could storyboard in the Fairly Odd Parents style was really tricky because Fairly Odd Parents is a tricky show to storyboard. Make no mistake, because the art direction is very restrictive, and it's tough to get people to work in that style but not make it look like they're feeling restricted. And for whatever reason, I had a knack for it, which is insane because that style, that sort of Hanna-Barbera meets UPA meets a little bit of just old school, whatever, graphic designy, thick lines and sharp edges, that's not my natural style. But for whatever reason, when it came to storyboarding it, I got it. I think one of the main reasons that Butch liked my boards is because I was a stickler about clarity. I was always just like, it has to be clear what's happening because if if the visuals aren't 100% abundantly clear, the jokes won't land, and if the jokes won't land, the show's not funny. And so that was the thing he saw about my boards that he was not seeing in everybody else's boards. And so I said to him, I'm like, "Hey, why don't you make me the storyboard supervisor? And yes, I will continue to direct, and yes, I will continue to do storyboards, but I will also look over everybody's boards before they even bring them to you, and I'll go over changes for them to make them more Fairly Odd Parents esque." And he liked that idea, and so they created the position for me of storyboard supervisor. Um, which was originally, I mean, they gave me the title storyboard supervisor after the fact. Because one of the other things Butch liked about my stuff was my timing was always really perfect. Again, it just fit the style of the show that he wanted to do. And so the title that I originally volleyed for, and that if to this day, if you ask me what was my position on the Fairly Odd Parents, I will say I was the supervising director, because that's really what I was. Because I was not only supervising the storyboards, I was supervising the other directors. I would look at the other directors' stuff and make sure it was up to snuff before Butch saw it, because Butch at the time was gearing up with his 10th show in development called Danny Phantom. And this was taking up a ton of his time, which made me, for him, all the more indispensable. So he was working on Danny Phantom a lot, so he became more and more reliant on me. And I loved it. I had nothing but time on my hands. I think I was 29 or 30 at the time, single, living alone in Los Angeles. And so I loved pouring myself into that job. And I loved working there. I loved working on the Fairly Odd Parents. The Fairly Odd Parents, I was sharpening my claws and I was really learning the ins and outs of directing. And by the way, I had people at Nickelodeon, big shots and executives, telling me every other day, "Oh my gosh, you're the next Butch Hartman. You're the next young creative talent. You're going to be huge, blah, blah, blah." I really loved the crew on Fairly Odd Parents. Just a great, amazing set of people. I had gotten to bring in some of my friends from Invader Zim. When Zim got canceled, I got to bring them over to do boards on Fairly Odd Parents, and they wound up doing boards on Danny Phantom, which is why you'll see a lot of crossover there. And so I was having a blast. It was really like a high point in my career. But at that same time, as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I moved to Los Angeles with the intention of selling my own shows and being a creator. So the whole time this is going on, I'm also pitching shows to Nickelodeon. By the way, during this whole time, Fred Seibert is pushing really hard for the Tantrum to be made into its own series. But while that's all happening, I've got another show that I had been pitching around really hard called Nightmare Hunters. And by the way, Nightmare Hunters is a pilot that we're doing for season 2 of this channel right here. So be sure to like, share, and subscribe so that you can see sneak peeks of it. And so the whole time I'm going around pitching other shows. And by the way, before I get too far, by this time, I had already pitched probably a dozen shows to every network. Now, none of them got picked up, but what that did do was it got the buzz on F going throughout the industry. Like, people in development knew my name, executives knew my name, other directors at other studios knew my name. So I had people all across the industry go, "Oh, that's John Fallon," So come on, how was I not supposed to enjoy that? So the whole time I'm supervising director for Fairly Oddparents, I'm also pitching my own shows. And by the way, I wasn't secretive about it. I would tell Butch outright. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I can't make this meeting because I have a pitch going on at Warner Brothers." And my whole thing was, my attitude towards that from the very beginning was, because again, now Butch and I were very, very, what I would call very, very, very friendly. Like, we, at least from where I sat, enjoyed each other's company, really had fun when we were working one-on-one together. We would have lunch every now and then. We were very, very friendly. I don't know if we were ever what you would call friends. Like, I'm pretty sure he and Steve Marmel were friends. I'm pretty sure he and Bob Boyle were friends. Like, I think they would get together outside of Nickelodeon and hang out, I think. Butch and I were never that. We never were like, "Hey, let's, get the families together," because I was a single guy at the time and he was married and already had 2 kids. So I don't think it was a slight on his part. I just think we kept different hours. And but again, we were always really, really, really friendly. And my whole position was, isn't this great? You've got, Danny Phantom has a huge buzz around it. Fairly Oddparents is the #2 show in the world. Isn't this great? And by this time, Warner Brothers had optioned Nightmare Hunters to do as a pilot for their studio. So my success was seeming more and more imminent. And my whole thing with him was, isn't this great? We're both doing amazing stuff. And his whole position was always, "You're going to get your own show and you're going to leave. You're going to get your own show and you're going to leave. And I'm never going to be able to replace you," which, by the way, he did and had no problem with it. Dave Thomas did a great job. "Oh, you're going to leave, you're going to leave, you're going to leave." And he was always, he was joking about it, but he kind of wasn't, from where I sat. And I kept saying to him, I'm like, "Butch, I'll leave the show if I get my own show, but that doesn't mean we have to stop working together. Let's do a show together. Let's create together. Let's do more stuff together." So that was always my position. Hang on, I've been talking for a really long time. Let that sink in for a minute, the 2 positions that we both had. Mine was all like, I'm excited that everything seems to be going so great. And it's going great for both of us. So let's celebrate together. Let's, you and I are going to own this town, I think I've said more than once to him. But his whole position was, "Oh, you're going to leave, you're going to leave." And I was like, "Butch, my position was, I never want to compete with you. I had said a million times, I thought it would have been awesome for the Tantrum to be the show that fell in between Invader Zim and Fairly Oddparents when they aired them on the network, because Invader Zim is very dark, Fairly Oddparents is very light. The Tantrum was somewhere in between those things, so it would have been a perfect thing to put in between them. Anyway, so all this is going on. They create the position of supervising director / storyboard supervisor for me, and at that point, I am riding high. I'm really enjoying my life on Fairly Odd Parents because I get to focus on all the stuff I'm really good at and all the stuff that I find really satisfying, enjoying, and none of the stuff that I don't. I get to be there in the voice recordings. I get to be there in the editing bay. I'm learning more and more, not just to be a director, but how to be a producer. Um, and that's when I started to think to myself, gosh, this is what I should really be doing is producing. Um, and so, like I said, at the same time, Danny Phantom was in development. Danny Phantom was looking absolutely amazing. I liked the earlier incarnations of it better than the version that came out, even though the version that came out was absolutely stunning, absolutely looked great. Um, but I was starting to feel like, okay, I've kind of done everything I can do with the Fairly Odd Parents now. It's kind of on autopilot. Um, you know, every other episode turned into another version of Action Packed. Every other movie turned into another version of Abracatastrophe, just in its scope and in its tone and everything. So it was kind of on autopilot, and I was starting to feel, the itch for something new. And it was right around that time that Disney came a knocking because they had a show called American Dragon Jake Long. And now, bear in mind, this whole time, I'm developing a show with Warner Brothers called Nightmare Hunters. And at the same time, Butch is developing his show, Danny Phantom. All involve the supernatural, all have monsters, all have, protagonists fighting off these things. Um, so uh, Disney approaches me about American Dragon Jake Long. They're like, we love everything you've done on the Fairly Odd Parents. We want you to come be the director of this show. You will be the director. You will be in charge of this show. And I was like, ooh, a show called American Dragon that's supernatural and has monsters. I can really, really flex my action skills because by this time I'd really come to love doing action storyboarding. I always choreographed all my own fights and all my own chases, all my own action stuff. I'd really come to love doing that, and I'm like, oh, that is a show that is really going to let me cut loose on that. And in addition, it's a kid who turns into a dragon. I mean, what's not to love? So, but then meanwhile, Butch had already told me at that time, hey, if Danny Phantom gets a pickup, you'll be able to direct episodes of that as well, which I was very excited about. But then the time comes, and so Disney offers me this. They offer me it's a good amount of money, really good position, a what was for me at the time ostensibly a promotion. I would go from being a supervising blah 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 to being the series director. So this would be a big bump up for me. But at this point, I had been at Nickelodeon for 5 years, which by animation terms, that is a really long time because most people you'd spend sometimes less than a year on a show, and then the show would wrap, and you would go work on another show, and sometimes change studios, sometimes hop from show to show. That's the nature of the beast, or that's how it was at the time. So I didn't want to leave Nickelodeon. I had friends there. I was comfortable there. The studio as a whole was very, very pro me. And Nickelodeon had told me in no uncertain terms, we want to make a show with you. It's a matter of doing the right show. By this time, the Tantrum had been passed on. They absolutely were not interested in Nightmare Hunters the way Warner Brothers was. And so there I was with this offer from Disney. Now, I don't care what your opinion is of the studio. If you are a cartoonist or an animator and the Disney offers you a job, you have to really, especially one that's a promotion, you have to really seriously consider it. So I did. And I gave it really, really serious thought. And so I finally came to this conclusion. I went to Butch and I said, Butch, I'm getting this fantastic offer from Disney. It's kind of impossible to turn down. I'm like, but I really love working at Nickelodeon. I really love working with you. I really feel a sense of kinship here. I don't want to leave. I'm like, but it would be stupid for me to turn this down. I go, so, um, if you let me either be in charge of, that is to say, the series director for The Fairly Odd Parents, or the series director for Danny Phantom, uh, you would still be executive producer. You would still oversee everything I ever did. You would still be the series creator, but I would be running either Fairly Odd Parents or Danny Phantom because you can't possibly do both and do them both with equal efficiency. Let me have one of those shows to run, um, and I will stay. And from what I remember and from what I was able to gather, he seriously considered it. He gave it lots and lots of thought. And by lots and lots, I think it was a day. I don't think it was very long. I don't recall it being terribly, terribly long. And he gave me his answer with about as much sincerity as anybody could. He just couldn't do it. Both shows were his babies, which I completely understand. Both shows he felt he had very strong opinions about, which I completely understand, but he couldn't let go of the reins of either one of them. He wanted to run them both simultaneously. And I could tell that that's something he wanted to do. And so I wasn't going to try and convince him to do otherwise. And so I was like, well, then I'm going to leave and go to Disney and do this show. And he was like, see, I told you you were going to leave. And I was like, I'm looking for an excuse to stay, Butch. But anyway, so, and I'm going to do another video about this another time. I went to American Dragon. I did an animatic pilot for that show. That whole experience of the Jake Long American Dragon with me at the helm wound up being an absolute disaster. It became very apparent very early on that it was not a good fit because I was working with a writer who kept insisting, executive producer who kept insisting that the show needed to be like Seinfeld. He kept saying, make it like Seinfeld. We're going to make it like Seinfeld. There was an executive who was in charge of it who absolutely hated everything I did, and I'm not afraid to say he was an absolute jerk to me. I was pleased to find out recently that he went off into obscurity. Because, he was just a nasty, nasty person and an absolute jerk to me, hated absolutely everything I did. By the way, I'm here to tell you right now that if I were to show you my pilot for Jake Long American Dragon, if you're watching this channel at all, you would have loved it. If you loved Danny Phantom, you would have loved it. If you loved Kim Possible, you would have loved it. My version of it was great. Now, what they did with the show wound up being what I will qualify as saying really good stuff. They did the best they could with what they had. What's funny is in season 1 of American, and I realize this is a point of controversy. Season 1 of American Dragon, the designs look polar opposite of what I did. Season 2 of American Dragon, which is the season where everyone sort of agreed that's how it should have looked all along. They were 100%, and I've gotten confirmation from this, that they took my designs that I had originally done for the series and kind of retrofitted it to go in that direction because everyone knew that was a better direction. So, but my version of it had just tons more action, tons more just cool stuff. I had said to myself internally, all right, I've got this show called Nightmare Hunters at Warner Brothers, and the bottom line is, if Warner Brothers turns it into a series, it will be in direct competition with Danny Phantom and American Dragon. I'm like, that's just the bottom line, because thematically and tonally, they are all very similar shows. Teenage kids dealing with supernatural monsters coming into the world. So I had said to myself, whichever one takes me, whether it's Danny Phantom or American Dragon, I'm just gonna take all of my ideas that I was gonna put into Nightmare Hunters, and I'm gonna put them into one of these shows. Well, guess what? I never had the opportunity to do those things. So now, using Fountain's Pen Productions here, we are making the pilot for Nightmare Hunters, which is, like I said, just another reason you should like, share, and subscribe, because it's already looking amazing. But anyway, I digress. Had an absolutely terrible experience at American Dragon, was summarily fired before the full pilot ever even got made. And then I was floundering because I was at a loss, because I'm like, I left the #2 show on the #1 network for kids in the world to do this thing, and now I don't have a job. Butch clearly hated me. I'm assuming he hated me for leaving, or he just hated me the whole time and was looking for an excuse. But I just kept hearing story after story about how he would, John was never that great to begin with. That was really all me, and that kind of stuff. Stuff would get back to me. Maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I had sort of put my feelers out about returning to Fairly Odd Parents, and my agent at the time, who was also Butch's agent at the time, was like, no, that's not going to happen. So fortunately, one of the pals that I had, gotten chummy with from my Oh Yeah cartoon days was Rob Renzetti, who was also doing his show, My Life as a Teenage Robot. And I'll do a whole video on My Life as a Teenage Robot another time, because even though my experience on Invader Zim was great, my experience on Fairly Odd Parents was great, my experience on My Life as a Teenage Robot was, of my Nickelodeon days, that was my favorite show that I ever worked on. So I had just gotten fired from Disney, and fortunately, Rob Renzetti was gearing up for My Life as a Teenage Robot, so he gave me a job doing storyboarding and directing for that show. And so I was back at Nickelodeon, which was great, and I was back doing, the things that I had, originally wanted to do. And by the way, My Life as a Teenage Robot was very much an action show. I mean, it was more of a comedy, but it was very much an action show. And I got the reputation very early on as being the action guy on that show. And I got the reputation for taking those storyboards into stratospheres that, were frustrating for some, but seemed to, hit with the audience. So, so that was how I left Fairly Odd Parents, and that's why I left Fairly Odd Parents. And it created a rift between Butch and myself that I really never wanted to exist. As you recall, when I was telling the story, I never wanted to compete with him. I never wanted to be a rival. I always wanted to be proud of saying that was my mentor. That was the guy who taught me everything I knew. But there was clearly bitterness there, and it was not on my end. And so, after that, the years would go by. I would hop around from different experience to different experience. My Life as a Teenage Robot ended, and then this is where the nail really hit in the final coffin of, in my opinion, my relationship with Butch Hartman. Towards the end of Teenage Robot, Bob Boyle had sold a show to Disney, who I had now worked for before, that was being co-produced by Steve Marmel, the head writer and co-producers of the Fairly Odd Parents, and they were jumping ship from the Fairly Odd Parents to go to Disney to do the show. Bob Boyle, by the way, simultaneously sold one show to Disney and another show to Nick Jr., Yin Yang Yo and Wow Wow Wubsy. So Bob Boyle suddenly found himself in a Butch Hartman position where he was doing two shows at the same time. He didn't want to his credit, he didn't want to try and run both at the same time, where he was in the office every day. He had already determined, I want to be in the office every day for Wow Wow Wubsy, so I need someone to be in the office every day and really run the show of Yin Yang Yo. And he chose me. And that wound up being a wonderful experience. I loved working on Yin Yang Yo, but suddenly you've got the head writer, the art director and the supervising director of Fairly Odd Parents all going over to Disney to all work on Yin Yang Yo. Well, it's not hard to determine why Butch was not real happy about that. So, and again, this is all just hearsay. This is people telling me this is how he reacted, this is how he felt, blah, blah, blah. But, by that time, I'd had enough distance from Butch where it was sort of like, all right, it was a great experience. He taught me a lot. I'll be forever grateful, but I'm ready to just be my own guy, do my own thing at this point. And beyond that, decades would go by when I never even gave him or any of the friction or anything like that. I never gave it a thought. But I would always hear things through the grapevine, and it, like I said, it was very clear that I was never going to return to Fairly Odd Parents, or was I? About a year before I finally left Los Angeles, I don't know, I think it was 35 or something like that, possibly even pushing 40. In fact, now that I think about it, I probably was pushing 40. I think it was either the Fairly Odd Parents last or Fairly Odd Parents penultimate season. And they were short a board artist, and they just really desperately needed someone to do storyboards for it. And at the time, I was working at a place called 6 Point Harness, doing a show called Good Vibes for MTV, which was also a really good show that absolutely nobody watched. But at the same time, Fairly Odd Parents needed a board artist, and I one of the head line producers of the show at the time called me and said, "Do you want to freelance a board?" And I really didn't want to, but I also thought to myself, well, this would be a really nice way to patch things up, and this would be a nice way to sort of, ultimately, finally, truly leave Fairly Odd Parents on a good note. And so I very enthusiastically said, yes, I would love to do it for you. And it was the episode, it was something about Planet Dads. I think it was, or the second Planet Dads. I've never actually watched the episode. Because what wound up happening was I did the storyboard freelance, did my usual job, did what I felt was a very, very, very good job on it, put all my usual panache into it. And then Butch proceeded to, I'm told, I heard through the grapevine, and by grapevine, I mean from a really, really, really reliable source. Not going to say who, but someone on the Fairly Odd Parents who was in a position to know, told me that Butch just ripped it to shreds. Now, despite ripping it to shreds, they used every shot. Like, every shot in there is mine, and they also wound up taking my name off the credits. And what's funny is my predecessor, the guy who took over for me, who I sort of mentored a little bit on the Fairly Odd Parents, on getting the Fairly Odd Parents style, boarding the Butch Hartman way, et cetera, et cetera. The guy who took over for me saw the board and told me that he loved it. So he didn't know what Butch's problem was. Nobody could really tell me why Butch hated it, but apparently he did. So the very final episode of the Fairly Odd Parents that I worked on, apparently Butch absolutely hated. And like I said, I haven't watched it just because I would have rather not think of that as my last episode of Fairly Odd Parents, and so it's hard for me to be upset with the fact that they took my name off it. But there you have it. I'm telling you now, that's my last episode of the Fairly Odd Parents. And again, to wrap all this up, and by the way, when I'm done wrapping up, I'm going to show you some artifacts from my days on the Fairly Odd Parents, so I hope that interests you. I get asked all the time now about my relationship with Butch Hartman, because I've spoken about my experiences with him and with the Fairly Odd Parents, and it's funny on social media. And what's funny is half the people that I come across are angry at me for not hating Butch Hartman, and the other half are angry at me for bad mouthing him. So let me set the record straight. And I can say this with a certain amount of detachment now that I'm about to be 55 years old. I've been around a bit at this point, and um, what I think a lot of people don't understand, and what a lot of people still need to learn as they get by in life, is so many things are not black and white. I don't hate Butch Hartman. I have a fondness for Butch Hartman that cannot be denied. Um, I also have resentment for him. That also can't be denied. I could say the same thing about many, many of my very best friends in past relationships. Um, it's it's not as cut and dried as all that. Now, there's also the cabal of people who, and what's funny is I had never heard about Butch's ambitions for starting networks and saying things that didn't go over well, and all kinds of other stuff that people don't like him for. And I hadn't heard any of this. Like a good decade and a half had gone by where I hadn't thought of Butch Hartman at all. It was only until I finally got on Twitter and started, thinking about starting my own independent cartoon endeavors and whatnot, that people started saying to me, "Have you heard about what Butch has been up to?" And I'm like, "No, what's he up to?" And that was all the first I'd heard of it. So, leaving all of that stuff aside, my opinion of The Fairly Odd Parents is this: it was the show that really let me cut loose, and I am incredibly, incredibly fond of it. I have super duper fond memories of it. I loved the people that I worked with. It was an amazing crew. It was an amazing experience, and I will always have a fondness for The Fairly Odd Parents. Um, it was a show that felt like home for a good long time. And as for Butch himself, and by the way, I'm still friends with Steve Marmel. I'm still friends with Bob Boyle. I still keep in touch with many of the people that I worked with on the show. Many of whom still just very, very good friends of mine. Now, I live in a different state, and we're all in different stages of our lives. So it's not like, we talk on the phone for 2 hours every day, but I am friendly with all these people, and that's, I think, the subtlety that people have forgotten. Um, Not every relationship is cut and dried. Not every relationship is black and white. Not every relationship fits into a neat little uh, category. So, when I get asked, how do you feel about Butch Hartman? My answer is mixed. It's mixed. I will never, ever, ever not be grateful to him uh, for teaching me how to direct and for giving me that first big shot. Um, that being said, I got a couple beefs with the guy, but you know what? It was a long time ago, and I got other stuff to do. So I don't think about it. I don't think about it except when I talk about things like this, which frankly, hey, I think other people are going to find this interesting. But I always try and end these stories with a lesson to be learned, and I think the lesson to be learned here is that a lot of times, especially when it comes to creative groups, everyone likes to think that everyone is best friends with everybody else, and oh, surely those guys are the best of pals, and they'll be friends forever, and blah blah blah. And that's not how people work most of the time. Um, and you could say, oh, well, that's a Hollywood thing. Well, not necessarily. I think it's a people thing. I think people grow. I think people change. Times change. Circumstances change. Um, and that's unavoidable. So, um, in your own lives, I would advise everyone keep that in mind. Just because you're besties with someone now doesn't mean you're going to be besties with them forever and ever. And that's not always because you have a fight or you have a rift or they like pineapple on pizza and you don't. It doesn't have to be something like that. People grow, and consequently, people grow apart. Um, the one thing that seems to be consistent in the universe is change. It's inevitable. So there's kind of no point in fighting against it when it seems to be such a perennial, um, entity. So, again, when I think of Fairly Odd Parents, when I think of my time on it, I think of it fondly. And when I think of those times in my life, including my relationship with Butch, and by the way, my relationship with everyone on the show, when I think of it, I think of roller coasters. There are ups, there are downs, there was drama, there was good times. It ran the whole mosaic. And you know what? That's what life is about. Life is about the mosaic. Um, and if it weren't for the bad times, the good times wouldn't taste nearly as good. And so when I think about my time on the Fairly Odd Parents, uh, the mistakes that I made, the things that I did wrong, the relationships that I had, the directions that everything went, it all uh, was an instrumental ingredient to leading me to where I am right now. And where I am right now is a really, really terrific place. Um, so, how can I not have fondness for the Fairly Odd Parents? How can I not be glad about that experience? It will always have a special place in my heart. And I will always be grateful to people like Fred Seibert, who gave me my big break, Larry Huber, who introduced me to Butch in the first place, Butch, who taught me how to direct, Rob Renzetti, who took me in and gave me another show to have a real voice on. All of these people have contributed to where I'm at right now, and where I'm at right now is a really wonderful place, which brings us to Fountains Pen Productions. To just wrap up this story, now, after a whole lot of time has passed, and after I basically retired from the industry so that I could take some time to raise my daughter before she started school, so that there would always be someone at home um, until she was of school age. Well, now she's not only in school, she's getting older, and I have more time on my hands, and that's why I started Fountains Pen Productions. I was like, you know what? I've taken enough of a break. I had done little things here and there, but I'd taken enough of a break. I'm ready to get creative again, and that's why I started Fountains Pen Productions, and that's why this channel exists. So again, when I think of Fairly Odd Parents, I think of it as great training for this, and it's giving me the opportunity to put into practice all of those ideas I had as a producer, and put them into this endeavor, and it's turning out fantastic, and we're having a lot of fun, and I'm getting a lot of satisfaction out of it. So anyway, that is my Fairly Odd Parents story. I'm sure in about 10 minutes after I hit stop on this, I'll think of about 20 things I should have talked about, but maybe I'll do a part 2 someday. But in the meantime, I wanted to take a minute to share some stuff with you that you're not going to see anywhere else. So this, yeah, that is the Fairly Odd Parents original Nickelodeon pitch Bible that Butch used to pitch the show. And as you can see, this was before Bob Boyle really got on board and sort of took the art direction. I don't know if the screen just blinked out. In a new direction. So there's that. Oh yeah, I teased this a little earlier. Here's my Oh Yeah Cartoons poster. I got this because the season 3 of Oh Yeah Cartoons ended, and my short, The Tantrum, was the very last one to get picked up, and so for a wrap party, everyone went bowling, and Fred handed out these posters, and I had everyone sign them. As you can see, right in the top corner. Yeah, here's my lovely message from Butch. Yeah, great memories. Oh, there's Rob Renzetti. Yeah, wonderful. I loved my time on Oh Yeah Cartoons, and the fact that it led to the Fairly Odd Parents, that's just icing on the cake. What else do I have? Oh yeah, Butch doodled this while I was going over my storyboards with him for Action Packed. Speaking of Action Packed, oh, not Action Packed, but Smarty Pants. This is a sort of pseudo comic that the Nickelodeon started putting out based on, various shows. They would just take the visuals from the show and put them in the comic. These are my drawings used from the show, and yet my name is nowhere to be found in this book. But that's neither here nor there. Oh yeah, some printouts from Action Packed that I'm super proud of. One of the things that I started doing early on is whenever there was a scene that had a particularly stunning visual, I would print them out on the Nickelodeon printer. This is, by the way, this is supposed to be me, and at the time I did look like that. I had hair and was thin and handsome. Oh yeah, one of the great things I love about Action Packed, looking back, is canonically I killed Cosmo and Wanda. They were dead. They were full on dead. They were not in the netherworld. They were not, they were full on completely unalived. So I take great pride in now they get brought back, obviously, but I take great pride in the fact that I did something so dark on the Fairly Odd Parents. Oh yeah, so here's my my original CosmoCon button, and yes, my handshake. Feel free to point it out and annoy me. So this is an interesting thing, and I'm really happy I hung on to this. It's falling apart, as you can see. But whenever we would, as I mentioned before in the video, whenever they would put the storyboard up in the conference room at Nickelodeon, people would use a pointer to point, to the panels as they moved along the storyboard. I would always use this as my pointer. So this is my official Fairly Odd Parents wand. I'm not even sure if but there's me and Butch and Steve and Bob at the Annie Awards. Again, that was at a time where it was pretty well known that it was the four of us that made that show. Oh yeah, here's my Fairly Odd Parents crew ball cap. My autographed mug when we got crew mugs. Oh yeah, you know what? I hate doing this. Talk amongst yourselves for a moment, but this is such a rare item, I feel like I have to share it. Because when the Fairly Odd Parents first got picked up, it was part of a 6-pack. That is to say, there were only going to be 6 episodes, and if those episodes do well, that it gets its pickup. Well, so each of those shows, it was Chalk Zone, Invader Zim, the Fairly Odd Parents. Chalk Zone, Invader Zim, and the Fairly Odd Parents each had 6-packs, and so someone in the studio brewed up a bunch of beer to give out as 6-packs of each show, and I got one from each of the ones that I worked on. So there's my Fairly Odd Parents brand beer, autographed by Butch Hartman, Abracaholic. What else? Oh, these are some of my favorite storyboard panels I've ever done. This was a seminal moment in Action Packed, and just goes to show how much detail and how much sort of love I would put into these things. Oh yeah, these were different versions of the Crimson Chin. This one obviously inspired by Action Comics. This one was the sort of military version of Crimson Chin. Ooh. Here's something. Oh yeah, here's the sort of Silver Age Crimson Chin. Oh, that's right. I did all these different. I forget what episode these even go to, but like this is the underground comics version of Crimson Chin, the punk rock. Um, this was supposed to be my Frank Miller version of Crimson Chin. Oh yeah, Disco Chin. Remember when the 70s were funny? What else? Oh yeah, Psychedelic Chin. Oh, this is a good one. The Rocketeer version of the Crimson Chin. If these were ever in an episode, I've completely forgotten which one. So, if you could let me know in the comments, I'd be thrilled. Because I did those after I had become Storyboard Supervisor, so it was at a point where I wasn't doing that much detailed drawing on the storyboards. I would usually thumbnail them and then hand them off to the board artist. Here is a deleted scene from Action Packed where Chester and AJ, Chester was going to be the British guy who gave Timmy his gadgets, and AJ was going to be the big, dopey buddy. I'm not going to go over every page, but yeah, deleted scene. Oh yeah, this is another what I call glory shot from Abracatastrophe. One of my favorite parts in Abracatastrophe was the sort of lightsaber duel with Crocker and Timmy. Oh, and by the way, I'm happy I remembered this. By the way, for those who ask me all the time, in Abracatastrophe, was Timmy's costume inspired by Moon Knight? The answer to that is absolutely yes. Because in the way the script had called for him to be wearing one thing as a cape but have the Groucho nose on and have all this stuff around him and on him and all that, I really hated that. And so I wanted to come up, because drawing Timmy in all these action poses while he was wearing the Groucho nose was going to completely take away from the gravity of the situation. So I made a point of creating a situation where he pulls the hood up over his head and that covers his face, and that way we can put him in action poses and he'll look cooler instead of looking like a doofus with the Groucho nose on all the time. So yes, that was 100% inspired by Moon Knight. I made it look like that on purpose because I knew it would serve the action better. Here's one of the few scenes where they're in the sort of lightsaber duel, Timmy with his mirror and Crocker with his scepter. What's funny was Attack of the Clones, Star Wars Attack of the Clones had just come out at that time, and I was super, super jazzed about the lightsaber duel between Yoda and Count Dooku because, of course, everybody thought that Yoda fighting with a lightsaber, someone so small fighting with a lightsaber, would look ridiculous, but it wound up looking super cool, and so I got inspired by that and used Timmy. Here's another one. Yeah, it's a scene that I really put a lot of work into. Okay, so these are how all my storyboards used to begin, and these are called thumbnails, and these are the thumbnails for Action Packed, and very shortly after this episode, I stopped using these page templates altogether because I hated how restrictive they were. And so I would wind up just flipping them over. Oh, look, there's the thumbnail for the scene with George. Yeah. I just started using the back of them because I liked big sweeping camera motions. And it's funny, those big sweeping camera motions and all the camera direction, I got sort of known for doing action scenes, and it got to the point where when I was doing comedy, where I would want the camera to be still, people would say, producers and stuff would say, well, how come the camera's not moving? I'm like, because it's not supposed to. Part of the art of animation is not just the art of making things move. It's the art of knowing when to keep them still. So I think that's everything I was going to share. Um, so yeah, just to wrap up, the Fairly Odd Parents was an enormous part of my life, and I'm really, really grateful to it. And I'll never tire of talking about it. I like talking about it. I think I'm hoping that me telling this story has given you some lessons that you can apply to your own life. And if nothing else, I hope it was very entertaining. But let me, again, be abundantly clear. I will always be grateful to Nickelodeon. Nickelodeon was a great home to me for a long time. I'll always be grateful to Fred Seibert, Larry Huber, Butch Hartman for, sort of giving me my big start in the animation industry and for really letting me hone what wound up being my craft. And look, the end result of all this can be found here on Fountain's Pen Cartoons, and I hope you'll see a lot of me in these cartoons. But I hope more than anything, actually, that you'll see a lot of the personalities of the crews that I'm working with coming out into the cartoons. So this video, I can tell, is already really, really long. So if you have stuck around this long, thank you for tuning in. Please, please, please like, share, subscribe, spread the word about this channel. We're doing it strictly for the love of the craft. And, again, I appreciate you being here. And until next time, this is your old pal F. Zigga zigga, party people.